Good morning again. I'm Tim Donovan, President and CEO of CCA. I hope you had a productive day yesterday. We have even more lined up for today. I'd like to thank our Pinnacle sponsors, Ericsson, Interop Technologies, Nokia, Samsung, Cineverse, T-Mobile, and TNS. Thank you for your support. We have some great speakers joining us this morning, but first, we'd like to take a moment to recognize the winners of CCA's 2023 Annual Achievement Awards. Each year, CCA recognizes outstanding members who've made significant contributions to the association and to the wireless industry. It is our chance to recognize and thank some of our members who have gone above and beyond in the past year. Now, as we announce this year's honorees, I'll ask each of you, as I call your name, to please come up to the stage for a photo and remain on the stage until all winners are announced. We'll get a group photo at the end. We begin with the newly renamed Stephen K. Barry Outstanding Achievement Award. This award is given to an individual from a carrier member who, during the previous year, made extraordinary contributions to both the wireless industry and CCA. This year, the award goes to Maureen McCabe-Moore of GCI. As a CCA board member, Business Innovation Group co-chair, and active participant at CCA shows and Capitol Hill Day, Maureen is certainly a standout CCA member. She dedicates a considerable amount of time to CCA this past year and offered valuable suggestions and feedback to benefit of all members. She is very deserving of the award. Thank you, Maureen, and congratulations. Our next award is the Nico Hamlet Associate Member of the Year Award. The award is named in honor of the late Nico Hamlet. Many of you know the name or knew him personally. Nico was an executive at American Roamer, which is now part of Ookla, and he was a good and loyal friend to many in the CCA family. We present this award to an associate member who has, in the past year, made outstanding contributions that significantly benefited our industry in general and CCA specifically. I'm very pleased to announce the recipient of the 2023 Nico Hamlet Associate Member of the Year Award is Ron Willett of Clear Sky Technologies. This award honors Ron for his exceptional service and dedication as a board member, events committee member, and problem solver. You all have been receiving text messages throughout the show asking you to provide feedback on the sessions you attended. Well, we all have Ron to thank for these texts. In all seriousness, getting more feedback on the educational program is something the events committee has talked about for a long time. Ron listened to the feedback and took action. He worked with the CCA staff and Clear Sky, was able to provide the service complimentary for CCA at the spring show, and it produced great results. Clear Sky is here again in Atlanta providing the same capability, and we greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Ron, for your contributions and your strong support of CCA. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have the Outstanding Service Award. This award is presented to carrier and associate members and may go to an individual or a company as a whole. We present this award for outstanding service to the community, willingness to go beyond the normal call of duty, and for reflecting positively on the wireless industry. This year, the carrier winner is Niemont. Niemont raised over $18,000 for local libraries in Northeast Montana through their Connect at the County Fair initiative. Supporting hometown communities is what CCA is all about, and we're pleased to present Niemont with the award. Congratulations. Congratulations. And now for our Outstanding Service Award for Associates. Our winner is NetScout. NetScout has partnered with nonprofit organizations to support programs that strengthen underserved communities with connectivity and foundational digital skills, STEM and tech awareness for high school students, and career opportunities in technology for women of color. In 2023, its Heart of Giving program completed 22 team volunteer projects in 5 countries, earning a total of $55,000 in team volunteer grants, plus $220,000 in grants related to digital equity and inclusion. Thank you, NetScout, for all your good work. Congrats. Our next award is the Industry Innovation Award. This award is presented to an individual or a company that has made an exceptional innovative contribution to the wireless industry. This year's winner is Moby. Moby is receiving this award in recognition of its partnership with Working Group 2 to move its core network to the cloud. This has enabled Moby to build a compelling app-first customer experience on the largest 5G nationwide network. Congratulations, Moby. Hey, Michelle, congratulations. Congratulations. Finally, we have the Distinguished Leadership Award, which goes to the outgoing chairman of the board, Mark Naze. Mark has served as CCA's chairman for a little over 2 years, and I know everyone will agree that he has been an outstanding leader. Mark's steady hand, sound advice, and thoughtful guidance made for an excellent chair. Not to mention, he's all around a really nice person. He is from the Midwest, after all. Thank you, Mark, for all you have done for CCA as chairman of the board. It's such a pleasure to present you with this award. Mark. We'll give him the award at the board meeting. Thanks, David. Once again, please join me in congratulating the 2023 award recipients. On the scene. Thanks, guys. Congratulations. And now for this morning's keynotes. I'm really excited for this first one. We'd like to welcome Kevin Kennedy, President, CEO, and coach of Warriors for Wireless. For those of you who may not be familiar, Warriors for Wireless is an association that helps veterans find careers in the growing 5G wireless workforce. He's here with us to speak about addressing your workforce needs. Please join me in welcoming Kevin.
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you here this morning. It's an honor to be able to talk to you for a little bit. I want to tell you just a bit about myself. I spent 32 years in the United States Air Force, 36 years in uniform, because I started by going to the Air Force Academy. And it was an honor to be part of the military. And now I really have the honor to be able to lead this organization. I'd ask you to please take a picture of my website or my contact information at the bottom, because I'd be pleased to talk with any of you. So I really want to spend just 5 minutes just to talk to you a little bit about how we could team together on a very honorable mission, which is helping our vets. So very just quickly, I only have 3 slides, but it's a pleasure to be with you. And I know you all have workforce needs. And so what I'm trying to do is help vets, that's the Warriors part, connect to meet your workforce needs. That's the wireless part, and wireless obviously includes wireline. I'll tell you a little bit about our processes, but it all starts with what your needs are. And when you're thinking about what type of entry-level worker you need, I would suggest to you those bullets under that first question are certainly among them. You're really not looking for somebody that just wants to be an individual on your team. You'd like them to be a team player. You'd like them to have some sort of purpose-driven, be purpose-driven, to have a sense of the importance of the mission that you're particularly trying to do, not just what they want to do for the day. So you'd like them to be purpose-driven. You'd like them to be calm under pressure. and not break up when they're just under a little bit of tension, right? You'd like them to have attention to detail. Very important in entry-level workers to have attention to detail and to continue to want to learn and grow in the particular job. And then finally, when you're giving them millions of dollars worth of equipment to install and make it work, you're expecting them and you're hoping that they will be very trustworthy people. And I would say to you, those are very good qualities, but how do you train those types of qualities into a person? And I'd argue you should look no farther than the United States military. You might not realize it, but, and I might have some bias because I spent 32 years in the military, but I will suggest to you that the United States military is the best in the world. Your taxpayer money pays for it, but it's the best in the world. And if there was any bias, it would be proven by a track record. And I suggest to you that if you look past over the past really 30, 50, 40, however far back you want to go, from World War II on, we've kind of proven our abilities that we are the best in the world military. We have the only blue water Navy in the world, and I could go on and on. I was in the Air Force. We have the best Air Force in the world. There's just so many wonderful things about it, but the envy of the military, and I've traveled a lot around the world, but the envy of the rest of the world is our enlisted force. And why would our enlisted force? We have some very fine equipment, but it is the enlisted force that really makes the mission happen day in and day out. And what the envy of it is how can we continue to build such a great enlisted force? I don't know if I'll just do a snapshot, think back of when you were 18. When you graduated from high school, how much did you know about any of those qualities that are on the top level? Now, your parents probably tried to talk to you about some of those things, but how much did you experientially know about those qualities that are on the top level? I will tell you that 30 minutes after I showed up at the Air Force Academy, my mother wouldn't have recognized me. And that's because all my cool hair that was down to my shoulders and my special clothes were all gone. And I was wearing the same uniform and all my hair was gone, and she wouldn't have recognized me. And part of that was just this process. It wasn't hazing. It was about learning how to become part of a team. And being part of a team and caring not just about yourself, but the team that you're with. And in 6 weeks, everybody goes through a basic training process. And by the end of 6 weeks, they at least have an idea of what these concepts mean. But it's purely head knowledge. And what happens in the next term of enlistment, most people go into the military right out of high school. And most people only spend one term of enlistment. That means they're in the military for somewhere 3 to 6 years. And then they get out and they come back into the civilian community. Now, I'll turn it into dollars. If you add up all the costs of what's invested to get those people through the basic training and then through their initial skill training, you're probably spending about $100,000 to $200,000 of taxpayer money to get them that level of training. Now, why would you want to walk away from that level of training? These people are coming out of the military after one term of enlistment, and they're looking for jobs, and they have those qualities. It started off as head knowledge when you were going into basic training, but by the time you've lived out those values for 3 to 6 years, I would say to you, for many of them, it's heart knowledge. It's experiential knowledge. And I spent 32 years doing it, so I really understand what is happening inside of a young kid that walks in the door at 18 and walks out after the end of it. But I will tell you, how much did I know about finding a job when I was in my mid-20s? I didn't know much. And you come out into the world, and you've not looked for a job since you were a high school kid working at Albertsons, right? Bagging groceries or whatever. And so you really need help. And I would suggest to you that the group that needs the help the most are these first-term enlisted. So I talked a little bit about 200,000 new vets every year. Well, those 200,000 new vets, those are the people that have come out after one term of enlistment, and they're looking for an opportunity. And now we're talking about what is our mission all about. And before I step to the Warriors for Wireless and how we try and translate into our processes, I just want to remind you something about this first-term enlistment people. Those first-term enlistment people, 60%, and this is a congressional research report I could share with you if you ever wanted to see it, 60% of the people that are injured in conflict are first-term enlisted. 60% of the people in conflict after conflict that are killed in conflict are first-term enlisted. 2 years ago in August, we came out of Afghanistan. There were 13 people killed in an explosion at Kabul airport. 12 of the 13 were first-term enlisted. So I would suggest to you, based upon my own understanding of combat and going to war, first-term enlisted sometimes see the toughest part of conflict. They see the toughest part of conflict. And there is not any single group that probably deserves our help more than that group. And yet I would say to you that when they're coming out, they have no money in cash reserves, and they can get into a downward spiral very quickly. And so they also are the ones that need the most help as they're coming out. So this isn't meant to be a Memorial Day message 5 months late, but it might be a Veterans Day message 2 weeks early. You thank a veteran every day when you hire them and you put them to work. You thank a veteran every day when you help them overcome the challenges that they might be facing as a civilian, when you give them steady work and a meaningful mission. And I can't really think of a better trade craft for any veteran to get into than this community. So that's why we do what we do. And so let me talk to you a little bit about our processes. We reach out to 92,000 veterans every year just to tell them about the telecom industry. Most of them think telecom is nothing more than a phone that they carry around in their pocket. They don't understand the rest of it. They certainly don't understand that it's a trade craft that they can make a meaningful, decent paying living with a lot of growth associated with it. So we reach out to 250 vets every day just to tell them about telecom. And then about 20% of that comes back to us and says, tell me more. I'm interested, tell me more. And then for 50 people a day, 18,000 some hundred people a year, we coach about specific jobs at locations where you're at. We started this process about 7 years ago. We weren't those big of numbers 7 years ago. But the difference is that 7 years ago, I had about 100 hiring partners. Now we have over 600. The only thing that separates me from helping 100 vets and helping 1,000 vets is the number of hiring partners I have. The more hiring partners I have, the more veterans I can help. The more hiring partners I have, the more veterans I can help. And we do everything for free. Now, we say we do it for free. Well, really, it's thanks to a lot of the people that are on that slide. We have some great supporters that have raised over $4.5 million. And I will tell you, and I have independent financial assessments every year just to make sure, 100% of every dollar that's given goes back directly to support a veteran coming into the wireless or wireless telecom jobs. 100% of it. And I could show you how all those dollars are being spent. But what we have been able to do is go from helping about 100 vets a year to this year we're going to help over 800 vets get connected to jobs, to your jobs. So we're trying to solve your workforce needs by introducing you to a vet for free. So if you're interested at all in getting free resumes, it's not going to be a fire hydrant coming at you. It's going to be more of a sprinkler that every once in a while I find a vet in Florida, or I find a vet in Washington, or I find a vet in Nebraska that needs a job. I can introduce them to you for free, and I would love to do that. So join me on this honorable mission of helping our nation's vets by just calling me up or shooting me an email, and I will contact you, and we would be glad to try and help you fill entry-level positions. This year, the biggest things have been inside plant and outside plant fiber techs, but we've also found people that come in and get into DAS tech jobs or tower technicians. All of those things that we have done. And together, we really can faithfully serve those that have served us. So thank you very much for your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Warriors for Wireless, for the important work that you do. I know that Kevin's going to be around for the show, and if anyone also would like to get in contact with him, let me know, and I'm happy to connect you. Next, we have a fireside chat with TJ Munn, Senior Director of Regional Operator Sales at Samsung, and Rob Faulkner of T3 Broadband. They will discuss how a wireless and fiber approach is the path to success with BEAD. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage. Thank you.
No, we appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about fixed wireless and BEAD, and really I think the overlay that our regional carriers can take part in BEAD and how and why, especially if you have a mix of fiber and fixed wireless. So to get started, I was going to ask TJ, basically, what are the trends in fixed wireless, and is it growing as a reliable means of broadband?
Sure. Thank you again, and good morning. Absolutely. I think if you just look at data coming from Wells Fargo and Juniper Research this year early, indicates about 60% of the net adds for the US broadband industry today are coming from fixed wireless networks. So over half of new broadband subscriptions are already FWA. And the numbers are quite staggering. I mean, if you just look at the top two carriers with T-Mobile and Verizon, between just those two operators, you have a base of about 5.3 million subscribers that they have on their FWA network. And that number is expected to grow to somewhere between 12 to 13 million subs that they'll have by year 2025. So just think about that. In terms of the growth, T-Mobile's second quarter earnings call, if you listen to the commentary, they're at a clip of adding about 500,000 subs each quarter, on track to add about 2 million each year. So this has been a wildly successful, huge disruptor in the industry, and it's only going to grow.
And as a point of reference, those numbers, they're taking a majority of the broadband share. If you read a lot of the industry market share, fixed wireless is among the highest growth. And as a point of comparison, if you look at, again, not to single anybody out, but it's a good point. If you take a look at the number 3 and 4 cable companies, Altice and Cox, combined, they're about 9 million subscribers today. For broadband, or I guess about 13 million subscribers today, if you look at just their broadband, not their video subscribers. And so within 2 years, just Verizon, just T-Mobile will probably exceed those numbers just with their service, not including all the other regional and WISP operators that provide fixed wireless. So it's still a very relevant solution.
Yeah.
But how is it relevant to the regional carriers?
So if you look at again, the trends, what's been good for the goose, good for the gander. The reason this has happened is there has been a lot of investment from the tier ones towards 5G. And what they quickly realized is that's added a lot of capacity. In case of T-Mobile and Verizon, in the order of 15 to 20% excess capacity was available on their networks that they were then able to offer FWA subscriptions for. So that clearly, I think, is something to think about as many of our regional operator that are here that start to think about a 5G upgrade that is going to add excess capacity, and that could then, in terms of looking for use cases or ways to monetize that investment, FWA then becomes a very attractive sort of quick means to revenue that network. In addition, there are a couple of other things to consider. Samsung did, we've looked at some of the usage of mobile versus fixed, and it's quite asymmetric in the sense that they don't quite overlap. So the peak usage for US mobile networks happens between the hours of 8 a.m. to about 4 p.m. And FWA, which is home broadband, starts to pick up right around 4 p.m. to about 10 p.m. is
traditional peak busy hours.
Peak busy hours. So it's in that regard, it sort of kind of works really well. And it's not making the experience for your mobile subscribers any worse. With 5G, again, you could argue there's potentially if you have an SA core in place, you could do things like network slicing. So there's lots of options here, but ultimately, Rob, what this comes down to is an equation of how quickly you can deploy service and how inexpensive it is relative to fiber.
Well, it's a relatively an incremental revenue opportunity for your peak busy hours at night when you may not have the same amount of usage and you have excess capacity.
Yes.
But how is that relevant to things like the BEAD program, the NTIA funding? Is fixed wireless an option? Obviously, we think it is, but what are your views on that? And then I think we'll talk about some of the economics around that.
Yeah, so if you look at the BEAD program, there is, the initial proposals obviously are now getting submitted. There is a December deadline for both the phase 1, phase 2 of that initial proposal. But overall, the fund is got what, about $42.5 billion. If you take out the costs associated with its implementation and the overhead, there is a net of about $40.5 billion that is actually available for disbursement. So you look at then the latest US broadband maps that have been published by the FCC, and you'll see that there is about 8.4 million what they call unserved locations and about 3.5 million underserved. So it's a total about, of the 114 million broadband service locations in the US, that's a total of about 12.4 million that are eligible for BEAD subsidy. And if you do the math, 40.5 billion, 12.5 million, that roughly amounts to about $3,400 per location, right?
To construct.
To construct. And again, Samsung have data that indicates the US average today for rolling out fiber to the premise is at an average of about $7,500 per location. And that's sort of an average, right? You look at rural locations, places like Nebraska and such, could be
substantially higher.
Substantially high. It could be as high as $18,000, $20,000. So right there, you see that there is a huge gap. And we believe, and a lot of states have started to see this now, if you look at the proposals being submitted, wireless is an option. It's a great option, and it's very reliable. It's not kind of what it used to be 10 years ago. And this is a real play, and this is going to help, along with fiber, help extend those BEAD dollars.
So another example on the finance is if you take those 8.3 million, I did a thought experiment and said if you have just serving the unserved, those are the areas that can't get 25/3 service, and you take the $42.5 billion, let's just say you had all that money available to you, and then you add the 25% matching funds that the government requires you to pursue with that, it's about $53 billion. $53 billion divided by 8.3 million is around 6,600 per home served, or home pass, that is, to construct. And that's just the unserved. That leaves the 3.5 to 4 million underserved, those that can't get 120 service, completely out of the picture. And if you take that $6,600, that sounds like there's a lot of money to put fiber in the ground there. Unfortunately, when we've worked with a number of our customers in the past in terms of building out fiber broadband, my experience from other companies and other customers, $3,500 to $6,000 in rural markets. Again, this doesn't even include the inner city markets that have been redlined. Those markets are substantially in the $5,000 to $6,000 range to begin with. And remember, BEAD is going after those areas that are among the hardest to reach in the country. Mm-hmm. The other part of that is we've had a number of our customers tell us that when they do rural fiber builds, they look at sometimes 8,000 to 10,000 minimum. So the message here is that if you think that BEAD is going to cover fiber across every unserved location, every underserved location, there's not a lot of money. The state I live in, Kansas, is going to be donating or allocating, I guess, about 25% of its $450 million of BEAD funding to fixed wireless. States like New Mexico and Minnesota have already gone back to their state legislatures and say that their BEAD allocations are insufficient to cover any of their customers or citizens in the way that they expect, not just in fiber, but they need more money. There's just not enough money, even with private equity flowing in and the matching funds. So our approach here is if you want to go after BEAD funding, which is a very important generational funding effort for the US, look at this as a hybrid approach. There's areas that are going to be very cost effective to do fiber, and those that are going to be very cost effective and no other way to do fixed wireless. In fact, you can't do satellites and the fixed wireless service must be unlicensed or a CBRS licensed by rural service. So 5 gigahertz is not available right now. 2.4 gigahertz fixed wireless isn't available. As an example here, I'll show another example that I did. This is an actual town. I went to the BDC map a few months ago, current map, and shows a town out in the west somewhere. I won't name the town. But the town city center is typical of a lot of very rural communities. In fact, the town that our company is based at, Council Grove, Kansas, is very similar. You have a very concentrated town center with a lot of located homes. It's already served by fiber, but as soon as you get to the rural areas 1 to 2 miles outside, it becomes very, very sparse. In this town, we looked at the city center, and there were about 100 broadband serviceable locations on the BDC map, and none of them are served outside of satellite or dial-up today, not even in DSL copper. And I basically went up and down the streets there and said, look, rural markets, you can usually do about $25,000 a route mile for fiber, and I can spur off on each side. Let's make this as efficient as possible. You needed about $175,000 for the fiber build, and that would cover everybody in that. That's about $1,700, $1,800 per home pass. It's a very competitive number. It makes a lot of sense to do fiber there because the cost to do so is very efficient, and you get, of course, the benefits of fiber, which is constant growth and constant capabilities as new fiber technologies come in. Yeah. But as soon as you go 3 miles outside of home, sorry about that, 3 miles outside of the city center, you run into the problem of I've got 50 BSLs, broadband serviceable locations. How do I serve that? And I did a simple spur coming off the city, and I said, I'm going to need for the 3 route miles of fiber at $75,000 to serve the next 8 homes. That's going to be close to $10,000 to do so. And we know if we could put up a mast or a tower in the city center and blast a 3-mile radius, which is very good for CBRS, using just GAA spectrum, and of course, if you have licensed spectrum, you can add that and get even higher capacity. You can serve all those 50 BSLs with a single tower in the center of the town for less than $4,000, assuming a $200,000, $250,000 mast to put up. And suddenly, you can take advantage of BEAD funding and serve the city center with fiber, and you can also serve the outlying area more efficiently and save your dollars and use those dollars to serve another town that's similar to that. And so the opportunity here is to say, look, it's not one or the other. It's what's the best use based upon the economics of the design.
Right.
And that's really what we're trying to get across here, is that there are opportunities with your licensed spectrum, with CBRS, and potentially other spectrum to take advantage and grab BEAD funding and use that.
Yeah, Rob, I'd add, so while the business case for extending BEAD dollars with hybrid wireless and fiber is pretty clear, and looks like there will be actually no choice in many cases, there's still a lingering, there's a lot of lingering skepticism on use of just wireless technologies around delivering
reliability. That's right.
Broadband. And we want to make it clear, I think there's a lot of that, and NTIA probably had the same thing. If you read the NOFO initially, obviously completely unlicensed is not even eligible, but it's only in extremely high cost locations that they're allowing use of wireless. And we think it could be a lot better than that, simply because this bad rap, which, if it exists,
legacy fixed wireless.
Legacy fixed wireless, it's this has been very sort of proprietary legacy systems that are not 3GPP based in the 5 gigahertz band, primarily requiring clear line of sight, not giving you the performance or the reliability, and that has changed dramatically. We've gone from being able to deliver tens of megabits to now hundreds of megabits, right? Easily on
licensed spectrum.
With licensed spectrum, with CBRS even, and if you got operators that might have millimeter wave, you could easily get a gig throughput on 28 gigahertz bands. And if you look at the user satisfaction, Recon Analytics put out a report. PC Magazine has another one that shows that people now have actually higher NPS score for wireless fixed broadband than even over cable, or in some cases fiber. In fact, half of T-Mobile's net adds are today coming not from satellite or from DSL. Those are coming from cable customers. So this is a really good option. It's out there.
It's maturing.
Based with 5G. It's matured quite a bit. And we'd encourage operators to give this a look, especially the ones that are making these BEAD applications.
So I guess if there's questions, reach out to Samsung on the product or us T3. We can help you on the BEAD funding questions and solution engineering. Again, we think this is a strong opportunity. It's going to be a multi-year opportunity, and it's something that all of us can take advantage of and help our neighbors and everybody else that needs to get broadband in these rural markets.
Likewise for Samsung, I mean, there is a full portfolio of radios we've got from almost every band you can think of. Especially our strength is in the mid-band, 3.5, the C-band, CBRS. We've got a full portfolio of products. Our MMU, which is this multi-user MIMO system, can deliver 16 layers simultaneously, and that's 2x of our nearest competitor. And in terms of reliable, high-capacity broadband, we've got all the products. Millimeter wave, we've got our 28 gig AU product with baseband built in. Very easy to deploy, simplifies tower installation. So please reach out to us or to our partner T3 if there's any ways we can help you with your BEAD efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Thank you both so much. This is a topic we're following very closely in Washington, and we really appreciate your thoughts. Thank you both for being here. Next, and rounding out our keynote program, is Steve Zitnick, Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer for Interop Technologies. He's here with us today to talk about the messaging impacts of the FCC's new robotext rules for operators. Please welcome Steve.
Thanks, Tim. All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm always last. My last name's Zitnick with a Z, so I'm always last. This morning I'm going to talk about something a little bit different than things we usually talk about, but it's a matter that's come up quite a bit in our discussions with our operator partners and in the community and the industry in general, and that's talking about the new FCC ruling that just came out, was ruled on in March, I believe, surrounding robo-texting is what they call it. So it's kind of top of mind, something that we're going to have to be looking at and implementing over the next months. And with that, we'll get started. What I'll do is kind of walk through the background of where we started with this 402 document, which was the notice of proposed rulemaking. And that came out some months ago and has generated quite a bit of industry feedback to the FCC on what is and what is not possible. And then we'll go through the actual ruling itself real quickly. We'll talk about what is in it, what was rejected, and what future steps the FCC is currently looking at. After that, I've got to apologize in advance. I've got a really highly technical network diagram that I'm going to share with you. Try and follow through it with me, but we'll get through that and talk about the mitigation, the attack vectors, where these messages come from, and what can be done to mitigate them, and then we'll wrap it up. So with that, we'll get started with the 402 document. And this is, oops, we went too far. Well, the 402 document basically was the initial document that came out, and there were, outside of the normal regulatory malarkey that's in there, there were three basic rules they were looking at, right? The first one was the mandatory blocking of the three things, right? Unused, unallocated, and invalid numbers. So we needed to block those and use a DNO, or what's called a DNO list, do not originate list, to facilitate that. They also, most controversially, I think, were talking about using something akin to stir-shaken for the actual messaging traffic, so authenticating the caller ID, the A and B parties, and authenticating the messages. This, I think the FCC is pleased, by and large, with how the stir-shaken mandate has played out for the VoIP providers and, of course, all of the IP-based voice stuff. But there were questions regarding what can we do with the legacy platforms, or the legacy protocols, I should say. So things like SMPP, SS7, the MM protocols for MMS. And what can we do about that? Can we do anything about that? So they were seeking comment along those lines, and then seeking comment along what do we do to mitigate users who get on a DNO list or a block list, and how do we get them off? And they were suggesting things along the lines of a publicly accessible on the carrier's public website where people could do this kind of things and a number of other things. But what we finally got adopted is FCC 2321, which is the current rule. As I said, it was approved in March. And basically, they adopted 2 of those 3 rules. So the mandatory blocking has been adopted, and we're primarily going after those 3 things that are listed up there, right? Invalid, unallocated, and unused numbers. So that's a pretty low bar, to be honest with you. A DNO list will certainly do that. There are DNO lists that are out there. The FCC, doesn't mandate a DNO list for you to use. It simply, in the rule, says that it needs to be reasonable, which is a hole big enough to drive a truck through, of course. But nonetheless, that is what's in the rule. Now, DNO lists do exist. There are a couple of them. Probably the most prevalent one is the ITG, which is the Industry Traceback Group. That was created, it's a .org, it's a consortium that was created back when the FCC first ruled on DNO lists for gateway providers and voice. So this is folks like US Telecom, Verizon, AT&T, created a consortium to create this list and then publish and propagate that throughout the industry. So that's, while not mandated to use that list, that is mentioned in the documents quite a bit, and is certainly would be something can be used to be compliant with this mandate. But it's important, and we'll get into this when we get into the technical slide, to know that depending on how your network works and how your individual platform works, the DNO list may or may not be necessary, because keep in mind we're trying to block, again, invalid, unallocated, unused messages, numbers rather. So if you can do that without a DNO list, you are in compliance. So we'll get to what that means. They also talked about mitigating erroneous, entries on a DNO list. So if one of our subscribers gets on the DNO list, how do we get them off? They stepped back this rule quite a bit. I think they recognized that because they weren't mandating a single DNO list, we could very well end up with multiple DNO lists being used by different operators in different use cases. So working our way through that to get someone off that list is going to be, at least initially, I think, quite a laborious process, let's put it that way. So to that end, they removed the mandate of having a publicly facing button on your web page, if you will, to be able to allow consumers to do this, and simply mandate that you have a point of contact that can be to work on these problems. They also removed any timelines in how long you can take to get a user off the list, which is very helpful. And they also required, CTIA did some great work on this, but they required subscribers to be able to actually document objectively why they were on, or why they felt they're on a DNO list and why they shouldn't be on a DNO list. And this is really important because obviously if you're a nefarious actor and you can just go to a carrier webpage, hit a button and get yourself off the list, it doesn't do a whole lot of good for anybody, right? So that was, those were the rules that were adopted. Further, what was rejected. So thankfully for the industry at this point, they have rejected the authorizing, caller ID authorization, stir, shaken type stuff for text messages at this time. Mostly because what we all recognize is that if you are using SIP messaging, and a lot of the core networks now for operators do use SIP messaging, but a lot of the ancillary ecosystem around the messaging infrastructure doesn't. We're still using a lot of legacy protocols that were built in 2002, 2005, 2007, back when we kind of assumed that the wireless network was a trusted network. Well, now we know that no network is a trusted network, right? We need zero trust policies. But they recognize that at this time, we really can't implement this because of that. As I talk a little bit later about what's next, They are still advocating for that. They are still, we have another notice of proposed rulemaking that will, they're still seeking comments on how that can be done. And the industry is starting to coalesce a little bit right now on what we need to do. My own personal thought is that we need to kind of crack the standards books back open and kind of add some of this authentication capabilities into the legacy protocols. But there are a number of proposals out there within the industry on what to do. But as of today, that's not a requirement. There was also a lot of requests for the DNO list to be a fully sanctioned one. So to have a registered, sanctioned DNO list that we can all use for these purposes. A lot of the discussion around this was around being much easier to mitigate getting someone off the list if there's a single list than getting somebody off my list and your list and his list and whatnot and so on. Interestingly enough, there are no penalties in this document. There are no teeth. They do mention the TCPA quite a bit, and I bring that up only because the TCPA is a rule set that has pretty substantial teeth. There are fines in the TCPA that can go up to $10,000 per message that's erroneous. That applies mostly to the aggregator community, to the folks who work at the enterprise level, who manage the opt-in, opt-out lists, things along those lines. But I bring it up only because, there's a lot of talk, there's been a lot of talk at the show about, operators entering kind of the aggregator space on a local level. And while that's great, I have no issues with it, I would caution you to really look pretty closely at that TCPA, among other things, to make sure that you understand the work that the aggregators do to be compliant with that would now apply to you if you're doing that as well. So with that said, there are a few things that are still up for grabs, if you will, within the document itself. There is another notice of proposed rulemaking that basically covers 4 areas. The first 2 you can see are the 2 I just talked about that were rejected, right? The authorization of messaging, which is still under review, and I fully expect that we will get some sort of ruling out of the FCC in the next 12 to 18 months around this, once we can coalesce upon a methodology to do that. And then the second one is they're seeking comment on creating that centralized DNO list, recognizing that would be a much more efficient way of doing things. But they're asking for comments on how that should be done. So I do expect that will probably come out in the next 12 to 18 months as well, mostly to mitigate the difficulties you're going to find initially in getting people off that list if they do somehow find themselves on it. A couple other things that are relatively new. One is applying the DNC, so the do not call list as opposed to the do not originate list, to A2P messaging as well. As we're all aware, the do not call list is used by essentially telemarketers. Folks can put themselves on that list and hopefully not get called by telemarketers. And the FCC is asking whether we should apply this as well to text messaging. This one I'm not particularly concerned will actually get implemented because the DNC list is a very binary list. You're either getting A to P voice or not. And in the messaging space, particularly in the A to P messaging space, things like 2FA and stuff along those lines, that's also considered A to P messaging. And I don't think it's possible for any of us in this day and age to get through life without a 2FA solution being a viable solution for us. So that one I don't think will get adopted, but it is out for comment. And then finally, the last one is the opt-in. Currently, the way this affects aggregators a lot more than infrastructure or MNO particularly. But the way opt-in works right now is, think of it as kind of multi-channel. So if I get an opt-in from a customer for, let's say, an SMS message, right? That opt-in is also valid under current ruling for an MMS message, a voice call, an RCS message. You've opted into the brand, not to the channel. So the proposal is that they narrow that down so that consumers have the ability to opt in for individual communication channels, not just brand holistically. So that would mean you could opt in for just text messaging or just voice calls, something along those lines. That one I do think will probably has some merit, will cause probably some consternation for the aggregator community, but from a consumer perspective, I think that's a level of detail that they would like to have. So with that being said, here's the massively technical document that I put together, and I hope you could follow me through. There it is. Sorry about that. No, it's very simple, necessarily so, but what we want to talk about here is the various attack vectors and mitigation, and where would you put a DNO if you need one, right? So the big blue cloud over there is your network, right? That's the operator network. And this is probably the least vulnerable of attack vectors for this, again, unused, unallocated, and invalid numbers. But nonetheless, there is still a vulnerability there, albeit quite small. So here's where it's, remember earlier I said it really depends how your infrastructure works on whether you need to implement a DNO or not. There's a couple of different ways that SMSCs and MMSCs do things. And depending on which way it works, it kind of determines whether you're going to want to think about DNO at this level or not. I'll speak for Interop Technologies first. Our platforms all work off we call it a whitelist concept as opposed to a blacklist concept, right? So we have a provisioning API, provisioning infrastructure, where our operators call that when they allocate a new number, or God forbid, unallocated number, and that provisions all of our platforms and creates the whitelist. So anything coming into the platform that isn't on that whitelist doesn't get routed, it gets dropped. Some other platforms you'll see will use kind of a line range concept or an IR21 concept, right, where you're loading in a bunch of like whole line ranges at a time, whether or not they're used. So that in the future they might be used. That opens a little bit of a hole, and that hole is basically that you have the capability on that platform then to route unused, unallocated numbers, right? So from the interop perspective, with our operators, we do not believe that a DNO list is necessary at this step, particularly on the network side. But depending on who your infrastructure provider is there, it may be something you want to talk to them about, find out what they're doing as far as DNO goes, and move forward from there. The next kind of attack vector that we'll talk about is the A2P channel. And again, very much like the SMSC, very much like the MMSC, this depends on how the platform actually does its job. I can speak again to ours. We have a vetting process, which a number of you I'm sure are familiar with, whereby aggregators download to the platform their program briefs, all the information on the platforms, and then there's a vetting process, and ultimately the carrier is responsible for either allowing or denying that shortcode or long code on their network. So again, by doing that, you're creating another whitelist, right? There's nothing that's going to get routed through that platform that is not already approved by the carrier, and by definition, not an invalid or unused, unallocated number. So that's good on that side again. And again, if from the interop perspective, from our hosted infrastructure for certain, we don't believe that there's an attack vector there. Again, depending on who your provider is, you may or may not need to take action at the A2P level. IC is the wild card here, right? Because IC, not because security is lax or anything along those lines on the intercarrier platforms, on the hubs, but by definition, they're made to be an any-to-any kind of a situation, right? So we're trying to get message to anybody in the globe, which means it's a little more difficult to control like a whitelist type environment with the whole globe as your whitelist. The primary providers of that are our fellow Pinnacle sponsors, of course, Cineverse, who's with us as partner of Interops, and TNS, the other one. I know the Cineverse side a little bit better than the TNS side, simply because we work so closely with them. But I know that they have, and excuse me if anyone's here from Cineverse for mangling your brand name, but I think it's either Message Trust or Smart Trust, I think is the name of the product line that they do in order to mitigate this, and should be protected on that end too. I'm sure TNS is doing things along these lines as well. I haven't spoken directly with them about that, but it is an attack vector into the network. So given that, again, it's going to be a matter of how your infrastructure works and what your providers are doing on the DNO list. From the interop perspective, we do provide functionality, or will provide shortly after the first of the year, functionality to integrate the DNO. We'll be using the ITG list into our infrastructure if the operators think that's necessary. Again, from our perspective and from our lawyers' perspective, we don't believe it's needed in at least the hosted infrastructure. But if you're a turnkey, either an interop or other kind of a shop, you'll have to take a look and see what the ingress points are into the SMSC in order to understand whether you can whether you need a DNO at all. But for our operators, we will be providing the DNO. That'll be implemented shortly after the first of the year, right after the network freezes, and will be available as an option after that. Ultimately, Interop or any of the other messaging providers, infrastructure providers, that is, we are not the regulated entity here, right? The operator is the regulated entity. So we're providing an option if you wanted that added layer of security, or if you have individual needs beyond that. So I'm already out of time. But so basically, the current FCC rules are fairly benign. This is about as benign as we could have gotten out of this whole thing. But I do fully expect that's going to change as we go forward. Ultimately, the necessity of the implementation is dependent upon how your infrastructure is put together, and happy to talk about that. And Interop is providing this service on an optional basis to our operators. I'll be around all afternoon, all morning, and if you have any questions, please feel free to stop by and we can discuss further. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. We appreciate your insights. And thanks to all of you for joining us this morning. Please take a minute to respond to the text message about the session. Your feedback is really important. I want to remind you that we have some excellent breakout sessions planned by CCA's Events Committee. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the Events Committee for their hard work to plan these sessions. If you're on the committee, please stand up. They've worked really hard over the past several months, so let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. I look forward to attending several of the sessions. Please stop by the Grab and Go coffee station sponsored by TNS at 11 o'clock on your way to our breakout sessions. TNS is also in the exhibit hall this afternoon at booth 501, so please stop by to visit them. The exhibit hall opens at noon, and we will be serving lunch until 2 o'clock. If you need another round of coffee this afternoon after lunch, we'll have another Grab and Go station at 2 o'clock sponsored by Samsung. Please help yourself on your way to the afternoon sessions, which will begin at 2 o'clock p.m. The exhibit hall reception begins this afternoon at 4. Please join us for a drink, appetizers, and prize announcements. Don't forget to participate in Passport to Prizes and the business card drop at the CCA booth. All winners will be announced at 5:15 at the CCA booth, so make sure you are there. Thanks again to our Pinnacle sponsors, Ericsson, Interop, Nokia, Samsung, Cineverse, T-Mobile, and TNS. Thank you and have a productive day. We look forward to seeing you in Palm Springs in April.